It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.
Here. Hey, it's the podcast. We're doing it. It's happening. And it's only the three of us. Say hello, gentlemen. Introduce yourselves.
Hey, I'm Chad Jetner.
And I'm Peter Lawrence.
And I'm Kyle Bacher. Sorry, when I used gentlemen, I didn't realize you guys had to figure out I was talking about you.
It causes a longer pause than normal, right?
Like, is that me? Fads. I want to talk about fads today.
Like Beanie Babies or something else?
Like tech fads. Like
tech fads? Like what?
I don't know. It was Silverlight a fad?
Silverlight was a fad, yes.
Yeah.
Silverlight was a strong fad.
There are tech fads and there are business fads.
Oh, we didn't even mention Flash.
Flash was a fad that lasted a long time.
I don't think if it lasts an entire generation, we can really call it a fad, right? Like,
when does it become a trend? Like,
well, but it's gone now, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff like I don't think you can call CDs a fad or cassette tapes or VHS fads, but like Six Sigma, I haven't heard that in a long time.
And I'm trying to decide whether it's because I haven't worked in a manufacturing client in a long time, or if it's just because nobody's talking about it. It's perfected.
Yeah, maybe it's stronger than ever, and I just don't know it. I know SharePoint 2007 blew up. Like,
so talk about that more.
Crazy.
So
when SharePoint 2007 came around, it quickly became Microsoft's best-selling server product, like, of all time.
Aside from server, I suppose.
Because you had to have server to have SharePoint. Well played, sir.
Unless there was a free copy of Windows Server with every copy of SharePoint sold. Maybe that's how they did it.
So IT departments all over the world were installing SharePoint, creating accounts, and then saying, here you go, here's SharePoint. It'll revolutionize our business. And without realizing all of the things that you need to do to make for a successful SharePoint environment. And so what it became for most companies was just document management, document storage. I used to build websites, like external facing websites in SharePoint 2007, and I had SharePoint Designer, and I could do a lot with it. Yeah. But the speed at which it blew up and the whole community behind it, and I don't want to call it a cult.
Maybe a bubble.
A loyal following. It's kind of its own thing.
Yeah.
Very disruptive technology because it was changing the way people did business, and not every business was really ready for that. And so it just took a while. I mean, it's not going anywhere and it's widely used. So I don't know if I can call it a fad or a trend, but it seems like it was the next big thing.
I actually had to just Google SharePoint 2007 to figure out why it was, because it might have been a bigger thing for larger organizations, but at the time I was in a much smaller organization, and I hadn't really heard of SharePoint until I got into larger organizations. So what made 2007 so special for SharePoint?
Oh, I know the answer to that one.
Oh, answer it then. I mean, it's a question.
It made it more, it put a user-friendly interface on top of the technology that was underlying it. We'll call it more user-friendly. I don't know that it was user-friendly in the terms of today's user-friendly, but
I would say that it had a lot of promise for what it could do and what it could do for your business.
Well, and you could be a configurator and use it, right? Like your desktop support guy could fire up SharePoint Designer and do some cool stuff with it. Right.
And then that became a problem when it came time to upgrade. And all of those pages were broken, but that's a different story.
So it was a nicer UI on top of a current, like an existing technology stack, right? It put a fresh coat of paint on that and made it so that guys, configurators or, whatever that role is, they could just go in there and they could build. Like, what's an example of a thing that you could do there that you couldn't do before?
Organizing content.
I mean, you could make a very searchable document repository in very little amount of configuration, right?
Okay.
Right.
I need a centralized location to store all my blah, blah, blah documents, and I can name a blah, blah, blah link and everybody will have access. I can control things about it. I can do cool things about it, about those documents. And I don't have to write a front end. I don't have to create storage. I don't have to buy a search engine. I don't have to do all of those things. Those things kind of came out of the box, which I think was pretty exciting. I know that, what was it? Moss, was that the predecessor? Yeah. Moss was
2007. The predecessor was SharePoint 2003, which was it Portal Services? I forget the name. Every version
they had some different name, right?
Yeah, this was 2007 was Microsoft Office SharePoint Services or Server. It allowed you to do a lot. It had a search. It had a people side of it. With My Sites, you could have your own area. The usability was not quite there. It was pretty difficult for your end users to make the jump from file shares into SharePoint and managing content that way.
Of the front page of document management systems, right?
Yeah.
Or document storage systems.
Yeah.
Remember front page, that bad.
Yeah.
I thought front page was great. The little ActiveX controls you can just drag and drop onto your whatever. Perfect.
So, what are some other trends? I think of like strength finders was a hot thing for a while that people were doing.
I remember so many people. That's the 4 letters?
You get like your 5 or your 4 strengths? Like ideation.
Strength finders. I think I said string finders.
Strength finders.
That was the predecessor.
Strength
didn't take off as much.
Strength finders. You go through this long survey questionnaire thing and answer questions about yourself, and then it tells you what your strengths are. So strategic, activator. So you're good at getting things going, getting people going. Ideation. You're good at thinking up stuff.
That's a word that needed to go away.
Yeah,
it hasn't. I've heard it a lot. It's
every
still a
trend, every fad has like new jargon.
Yes.
And
for the longest, I mean, there were so many. I don't know if it was number of books, number of whatnots or widgets to be sold or what, but people's nameplates would have their strengths on them so that you knew how to approach them better or something like that. I mean, it was super fatty and fad-y, not
right.
I'm trying to remember. I think I had this once, but it was in the midst of it. Everybody knew that it was kind of silly, right? Like, yes. I'm not going to read a dossier on any one person before I approached them, or before I asked them a question or anything. Like it was.
Well, at least the programming departments I was in, yeah.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that, but it wasn't like it didn't influence anything. It didn't like, and that's my idea of a fad, right? Like if it was a thing that existed and didn't change anything, that's a fad, right?
Right.
I was gonna say like, you might almost say like portal servers. Remember portal servers? There was portal technology. Yeah. It was kind of fad-esque, but it did influence things behind it, right? So like. Right. The idea of a portal server was that you had like this umbrella over a lot of what you were building that took care of things like authentication and authorization and portlet to portlet communication, and there was a whole product offering around that. And it's not really. I don't know that I've heard of a fresh portal project recently. Maybe they still exist, but the concepts around that directly apply to today. So I don't really consider portals and portlets and all of that stuff a fad. I consider it a
stepping
something
stone.
Like a building block to where we are today. The Strength Finder, man, that.
Yeah, I think the dream was that you're gonna like put the right person in the right position, and when you build a team, you're gonna have complementary groups of people, and like it just doesn't work like that. You're kind of usually going to war with the army you have. And I don't know that Strength Finders was a part of any interview process.
Well, and maybe, and I just wonder if like the business needs overwhelmed the end goal of the tool. And it kind of fell out of favor.
It's a supply and demand thing, right? Like you have there's not enough of a supply of developers, so you're not going to be really picky. Hey, do you have this skill set, right? Instead of, do you have this personality?
Right.
We need a skill set to fill a role. We don't need a quiet but dedicated but whatever who likes to be approached before noon, and I don't know, whatever the heck those things. But exposed about your personality.
And we talked about team building, in the last few podcasts, and there still is a desire to find someone that fits your team.
Right.
It's just not an easy, box or corner or 4 letters or animal or some other thing that people have tried to put a label on someone and say, okay, I know this person. They'll totally work great with Chad because he's the exact perfect 4-letter combination that works well with this 4-letter combination. So we should put him there.
Yeah. So putting into practice, like, can you actually do it? It's like self-help books. Like they only help if you actually do stuff. Otherwise it's kind of just brain candy. It's like, oh, that sounds good. Like TED Talks, like, well, that all really sounded really good and inspirational and all of that. That was great. And then what do you do with it? Mostly nothing.
Nothing.
But it was nice to hear about my strengths. Like, that's cool. And I think any 5 strengths you have, or 4, whatever it is, you would hear about and go, yeah, I like to hear nice things about myself and what I'm good at. But nothing was a surprise when I took it.
One would hope that it's not a surprise. However, maybe there were a few people that were surprised, and those were the ones that really latched onto the system and said, "Oh, you mean I'm really a tiger mom, and I didn't realize it? I should totally be acting differently with my team. Now I will change that." But I don't know. There's a lot of challenge.
Hey, is working from home a fad? Is this going to go away?
Is hybrid? Is it just going to be like just how we are? Like
I want to put
we're kind of hybrid now. I mean,
I want to put a stake in the ground and say that at worst we will get to hybrid, but mostly I mean, when what was it? The director of Apple something decided that work from home was more important than something else. It kind of makes that a little bit bigger to, some people. If I decided work from home was most important and, everybody said, that's not true, Peter, you're wrong. You're coming into the office. You're the only one that's work from home. Be like, okay, I'm coming into the office. But
I think there's a lot of people that, it's almost like if you're going to look for a job, like that's a key factor is, can I work from home?
Right.
Because I really like when I don't have to spend 2 hours a day in the car just to go in and sit at a cube and do the same thing I could do at home.
And we've been building there, right? Even pre-pandemic, we were working towards work from home. Right?
Yeah. I was working from home back in 2011 or 2009.
Right.
On a project for a place in Amsterdam and a place in San Diego. And I never got to go to those places, no matter how much I begged. And you should fly me out. And one of the places was like, we're so big that we don't even meet in person. So, yeah, I think work from home is not a fad. Work from home is like the technology caught up, made it possible. And I think it's getting more acceptance is what's happening.
I think it's getting more buy-in. I mean, obviously from folks above us, but
places that are successful, right?
Yeah, and I think at the same time, though, I think those places are also realizing the value of having people talking to each other in an office. So yeah, I think
100%.
Hybrid is going to be, like, I don't know, this 2-3 days a week thing. I probably not a fad. Probably going to be just our life now.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't hate it.
I mean, I think a lot of it goes to sort of one of Steve Jobs' biggest, I don't know, quotes or stories or whatever you want to call it when he was designing Pixar, right? Was to try to build a place where I think it was the bathrooms were all centrally located so that no matter what, you had to run into people because they're bathrooms, right? And so you just naturally have different departments interacting through the course of physical proximity. And he was a huge fan of it. And I think that also went into Infinity Loop, right? That was also another key to that design. Because I believe, and maybe I'm wrong, but I believe that vision started with Steve.
Actually, fun fact, all of the bathrooms at one Infinity Loop are off-site. You have to take a shuttle to get there because they don't match the aesthetic.
It's just if you hit the smoking area, you've gone too far.
Yeah.
I think like I've been doing one day in the office, sometimes two, but for like the last 3 weeks, and like you get a buzz. It's like just that, like today was wonderful. It was amazing. I got to see people and you realize that there's something missing in those interactions.
I'm the opposite. So I'm 2 days at client site on site, and now 1 day at STG. Hopefully that continues, and it's the opposite of what it used to be. It used to be like, hey, working from home, because we did hybrid like before COVID for the decade prior, but it was like, yeah, pick 1 or 2 days a week and work from home. Great. And with the idea being handle all of your stuff, all of your appointments on your work from home days, your mid-afternoon weekday things that you can't schedule on the weekends, take care of that then. And then, focus a little bit harder in the office. And now it's kind of the opposite. It's like, I mean, well, that same principle applies, but I'm in it's almost like I'm going to handle my work when I'm working from home, knowing that when I go into the office, it's going to be a lot more social than it has been almost ever, right? So like when I got to actually like heads down develop or whatever, like that's what I do at home.
Yeah.
When I'm in the office, I don't want to say it's 100% like a, social time, but it is interrupt driven for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think these last few years really, really changed like fundamental mentality about being in the office and being around people, because it is, even though now it's been a thing, we've been going into the office for about 5 months now. It's still the same as like the first week back, right? Like everybody's still excited to be there, excited to be, chirping up. And the centralized bathroom thing, like that's not super real, but kind of real where I'm at, running into people randomly and having like just organic conversations and not scheduled talk time via Teams.
Right.
Yeah. And just that sense of, connection with the people you work with. It's closer when you're in person.
Yeah.
There's a lot less spontaneity on Teams than there is in person, right?
I tell people just call me on Teams out of the blue anytime, and it's rare. It does happen, but it's rare.
Then you get an appointment to schedule it, right?
Yeah.
Here's a thing that won't happen when I'm just working from home. I gave one of the designers on my project, her name is Allison. I gave her a pack of stickers for her birthday, and she applied them all to my laptop bag.
Nice.
They're everywhere. Inside, outside,
nice.
On my laptop. There was one on my back the entire afternoon.
That's hard to do remotely. It
is very, actually, you know what though? Way more impressive if she pulls that off remotely.
So one thing I don't hear about anymore is the like coding 24/7 marathons, people sleeping under their desks. Does that still happen? Was that a workplace fad?
Well, it almost feels like the startup mentality. Like we're gonna put everything we have into this, and I think some of that's gone away with being remote. Coding 24/7, sleeping under your desk. I know a lot of the bigger companies were putting in super fancy dining facilities, and get your dry cleaning and all of that right at work, so that you didn't have to leave. Full concierge service, so you never had to leave. You were there as much as possible, and I'm guessing some of that's gone away, right? But it might still happen. You never know.
I think it might still be a thing, like you said, Peter, for startups. And if you're part of that, and if you have, like, if you're bought into whatever that vision is, I don't know that 24/7 is necessarily it, but I certainly worked, a lot harder for tiny companies. Not that I slack at a big company, but when I'm truly like invested in the vision of the product and I'm incentivized to deliver on a different level, then yes, I will absolutely. I'm not going to sleep under my desk. I'm not going to not partake in my family, but like there's a different mindset involved that leads itself to being around a lot more. Not to say that I don't work really hard here, but we have different constraints here than we do at a smaller joint.
I was also going to ask, so along with that 24/7, always on, some of the talking points in stories has been like, well, you're always connected because you always have your cell phone, and you're never on vacation, you're never far away from home or whatever. And I know, Chad, you've talked about a vacation coming up, and that you'd made some concessions to not be on your device 100% of the time while you're on vacation.
Yeah, it's Well, okay, so yes, I've got a vacation coming up. I'll be on island time for, I don't know, the next 2 weeks almost. And I've made concessions, not with work, actually with my wife,
Right.
who understands that it's not really a vacation for me if I have to put, if I have to put my laptop and everything in a Faraday cage and not check it, right? Like, that's going to stress me out way more than if I've got, if she allows me to, maybe while she's getting ready in the morning and I'm reading my newspaper.
Yes.
Yeah. Just stay abreast of what's going on, answer softball questions, make myself available for, low hanging fruits and kind of just being abreast of whatever and making sure there's no catastrophes, heading off any if they are, or if there is one, doing what I can to alleviate, the brunt of the work until I'm back, like back. So
Right.
I don't know. That kind of talks to Kyle's 24/7 thing. It feels like a little bit of that mentality, but like this is more like this is just how you're wired and what your role is.
Just knowing coming back to an inbox that has 400 unread messages will be much more stressful than peeking at your inbox for 5 minutes a day while you're on vacation, right?
Well, yeah. And also if you're a lead on a project and, like being away that long, if there's I don't want to make a caricature out of the whole process, but like if a like say an endpoint, an API was we're starting a couple of fresh things. And if it started wrong, then it's going to be 2 weeks of work in a completely wrong direction. I don't want that to happen. And
technical debt buildup that you could have stopped with 5 minutes of email, right?
Yep. And there's support on the project and there's, other folks that would catch it. So I probably don't need to. It will just make me feel better if I did. Sorry, Kyle, you were starting to talk and I.
Oh, no, it's fine. I was just thinking like whenever I've been in that mode, it's been hard deadline, scramble mode. And then you're obviously like giving, you're taking away from your personal life and, working Saturdays, Sundays. I've worked on Christmas to get stuff done. But it's like, I'm okay with that. Those are sacrifices. And I just steal office supplies and things to get to be even,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
and I have 40 staplers just because I do.
I was going to say that I've worked every hour on the clock, all 24 hours. I have worked at some point in my career, all of them. Maybe not in a row necessarily, because I've been a big fan of you're just making more work for your future self at a certain point. But go ahead.
As an IT professional, I've never worked, more than, I don't know, probably 16. I probably did 16 once, right?
Sure.
As a non-IT professional, as a former blackjack dealer, I've absolutely worked a triple shift, like 24 hours straight. Just because.
Can I tell you about the best shift, the best 8-hour shift I ever had?
Sure.
All right.
What if I said no right now? What would you do?
I would move on to the next fad.
Does it have something to do with fads?
I'll make it as short as I can.
All right.
I was a security guard. I had to guard like a building over the weekend because they were working on the bank vault.
Nice.
So they had to have a guard there when they don't normally have it. So I volunteered and got there at the beginning of my shift, sat in the chair, got out my book, started reading, fell asleep. Woke up to see the next guard coming in to relieve me. And I was like, all right, have a good night. See ya. And I went home and I was fully rested.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a great 8 hours of work.
It magically worked out perfectly.
I was a visual deterrent. I still did my job.
Yes.
So back to fads. There was a lot of Steve Jobs talk. You brought Steve Jobs up.
I did. Yeah.
Like we're all studying Steve Jobs to be more successful, to be more like Steve. Was that a fad?
I've not heard about a lot about him lately. That's for sure.
Well, I
There
think
was
three or four movies. Yeah.
he was an influence, like the Theranos girl, woman. Sorry, Theranos is probably the biggest one, and then WeWork, that fella Adam Newman. I think like he influenced this kind of like iconic like, hey, we're not a company, we're a person, and there happens to be a company and a product behind that person. I don't necessarily know that was I don't think that was a fad. I think that's going to be a thing going forward a lot, right? Like Apple is still Tim Cook now, right? It's just a different person. I think that's going to continue.
I don't hear as many Tim Cook stories as I did about, well, Steve wanted it this way, or Johnny Ive, right? Johnny was another name that you heard a lot. Well, I don't know if they had better press agents or what.
Wasn't Johnny Ive the fellow that went to J.C. Penney's and was going to reimagine like retail? Who was that?
That was a different person from Apple, the former one that came up with the Apple stores.
Oh, the Apple Store concept. Yeah, that guy. Yep. Yeah.
He was a fad because we can't remember his name.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Like,
how about future proofing? I used to hear that a lot. That buzzword. Well, we want to future proof it. Like, I think was maybe a result of Y2K. Where
you're right. Y2K was a fad, that's for sure.
By 2032 is the next one, right? We're actually just a decade away. How fun is that?
What happens in 2032?
I think the epoch, the number of seconds since January 1st, 1970 is no longer able to be stored as a 32-bit value, right? And so there's going to be a lot more legacy stuff that needs to be updated as a result of that.
I will say that there will be some legacy stuff that needs to be updated. I don't know that a lot of, maybe it's different in your neck of the woods, but not a lot of my stuff was like, oh, we do everything based off of the epoch and right. Going forward, right? It's been converted to modern date libraries and things like that now for the most part.
I think what you're saying is true, but also I think what you're saying actually masks the problem a little bit, because I think there's going to be surprises. My guess is that there's going to be some surprises and some assumptions made that, hey, my library doesn't blah.
Right.
And everybody will be like, oh, it turns out the library that your library depends on does.
So that goes back to the conversation we had about the left. Was it left or some particular NPM library that somebody decided that they were mad and they took their ball and went home?
Yes.
And that killed about, 15,000 projects.
To Kyle's original question, to steer the train back onto the
what?
I think future proofing I don't think is a fad. I think that's I think folks are more aware of the fact, and not just Y2K, but like they're more aware of the consequences of a stale technology stack, right? Like,
yeah,
especially with the focus right now on security and everything else. Once your tech stack gets, a couple of years old, your exposure to vulnerabilities increases exponentially. So I don't think it's necessarily future proofing. I think future proofing kind of started this, but also like it influenced people's like decision making when it comes around letting a given product go stale.
Right.
And just to kind of bring that around, how old is the product that you're working on, Chad? Just to remind me again.
Release number 1 happened in 1997.
So that's a ways away.
So then you get in a situation where you don't want to go with stuff that's fading away. So you're looking at, well, what's the newest cutting edge thing? And then it's like, is this a fad?
What is the most fad like?
Or is this something that's going to last? Like, there's when do you hop on board? When do you actually install the update?
Well, this is soft plug for this mid-sized consulting company in Minneapolis called STG, but we actually do a fairly reasonable job of identifying some of these fads for developers
annually
with our tech DNA. Like, hey, explore this, use this, consider retiring this. Like, we have different phases for technology, and I think what a lot of folks try to do, especially with greenfield development, is identify the use that's going to be in that use column for the longest. Like, I think of things like React, right? Peter, you're a .NET guy. You write a .NET project, there's probably going to be support for your stack in a decade, in 2 decades. Right. Same with Java. So folks try to identify what those non-fads are to implement some sort of future-proof, like, hey, we're not going to be out of date in 5 years or 10 years. And not only that, but we're also going to be able to find support and a talent pool that's able to do, X. Yeah.
And then there's stuff that you think is going to fade away. But it turns out it's like the Terminator. Like, they just can't kill it. Like InfoPath. Like, they've been, that's been on the chopping block for years. But once you get enough adoption of people using it, you can't just take away their toys and leave them hanging. So you can't just shut it off. But like everything has a shelf life, I would think, and not to move too fast.
What is InfoPath?
It's a Microsoft product that used to be bundled with Office for creating forms.
Oh,
and
neat.
Forms that can tie into external data sources and do conditional formatting and stuff like that. So
super powerful, super easy, and then super went away.
Yeah, I did a lot of applications using InfoPath and SharePoint workflows, and I'm not a programmer. I don't write code, but I was able to do a lot with it. And so because of that, you didn't need an expert. People could learn how to do their own forms with it. So you wound up with businesses that had, hundreds of InfoPath forms being used. And you can't just take it away at that point. So it's like finding that sweet spot so you can avoid just getting on a bandwagon. Silverlight, that's not going to last super long. I don't know what the life of Silverlight was, how long it lasted, but and even as a tech person, as a consultant, where do you put your time and to develop your skills? If you went all in on a product that disappeared 5 years later, what are you ready to do next?
Right. And those are hard things to know, right? Because you want to be on the cutting edge, at least, right? You don't want to be on the trailing edge of a technology. You don't want to pick up InfoPath the year that they announced that it's going to be retired, but you couldn't necessarily know that, right? You don't necessarily have those visions. You mentioned React and JavaScript libraries have come and go and come and go and come and go, and React has certainly stuck it out for a good long time, and there are others. But there's probably a new one right now that we haven't heard of, or that I haven't heard of, that might replace React someday, right? And
I would imagine. I think. I don't know. I was talking about this with a couple other STG folks at Happy Hour earlier this week about how some of this stuff is almost generational, right?
Right.
I don't necessarily want there to be another React at this point. I'd love it if React just continued to be modern and relevant throughout. But a generation behind me, well, probably 2 generations at this point, I'm getting up there. There's an interest, and there's absolutely a mentality of let's throw away, the entire kitchen and redesign it from scratch, right? Let's put whatever here. And I'm sure that's going to happen again. And I will begrudgingly support whatever fresh hell the kids come up with for me. But it is, not my bailiwick anymore.
And it's hard. It is hard to stay up to date on everything because the pace at which things change these days has done nothing except increase with all of the cool tools and the build tools and the build pipelines and the source control and everything like that. The release cycle has gotten so fast.
I have had this conversation with younger developers, right? Because for me, and probably for you as well, Peter, getting to where we are today, everything built on itself, right? So initially we develop, somebody creates the deployable artifact, and we just slap it out there and it's good. Well, then we had CI/CD pipelines, and that did a little bit more. And then there's something that built on top of that. And then there's a cloud aspect to it that developed, deployed out there. And all of that stuff was kind of a progression from how do I say hello world to how do I build out an application, architecture, a CI/CD pipeline, the whole 9 yards in order to have a product, not just a couple lines of code. The hill that younger developers have to climb now seems much more intimidating than when I started. I don't know if that's true or not.
Maybe more intimidating at the start, but once you get a handle on it, it's so much more freeing because you don't have to worry about, what if I put this code out into production and it goes wrong? Well, then I just roll it back to the previous version and I deploy that with a click of a button, right?
Yeah.
It's so much easier than, then you just have to rebuild. You just have to undo all your changes, rebuild, copy it out to the server, hope everything goes well, and hope that you made backups and all of that, those kinds of things that, were commonplace 20 plus years ago.
All right. What's another fad? QCats?
Yes. Pogs.
I don't want to talk. I don't even understand Pogs, but I don't want to learn about Pogs either. I'm future-proofing my life.
I don't know that. Remember QCats? That was the barcode scanner that came.
Yeah.
They were trying to give away for free. I don't even remember what the whole marketing plan was around that. Well, do you remember QCats, Kyle?
I don't.
The little barcode scanner guy? Yeah. They were going to put barcodes on everything.
QR codes were kind of going to be a big thing and then weren't.
QR codes?
I've still seen them used today, but they're certainly not like, I don't know, as commonplace as barcodes of the day.
I feel like I used to see them a lot more than I do now, but maybe that's not true.
With COVID, going to restaurants, I scan QR codes constantly on my phone to get the menu. I helped the owner of Jack's Cafe in Northeast Minneapolis reached out because he just wanted all his menus. He wanted a poster that was a QR code. He's like, I just want people to point there when they were doing like takeout only.
Yeah.
I helped him make. I'm like, dude, it's not really. I basically gave him a website.
There's a website.
Menu here. Here's a website. Punch it in. You're good.
So maybe it's or there was a really good use case, and we finally have the adoption that, now it's going to take off. Or now it's taking off because there's a lot more people that can make use of it than there were.
We all have a built-in QCat in our cell phones now.
Right.
The little camera that can pull up a thing and display whatever. But again, I think the QCat, what if the QCat, Peter and Kyle, was a stepping stone to reading barcodes on your cell phone? Right? That's the only thing that was ever good for it had a single purpose. It just read barcodes.
That's all it did. And it wasn't portable.
You had to plug it into I think it was like a USB
PS2.
Why don't I remember or know about
PS2?
QCat?
It was PS2, wasn't it?
It was PS2. I know. I bought one after the fact from eBay to just to have one.
You had to unplug your mouse to plug in your QCat. That's right. It was.
Well, no, there was another plug that you plugged your mouse into the QCat, and it would feed through
A splitter.
A splitter of sorts. Yeah, it was a system, a design system that we don't have to deal with anymore. But at the time, it was a cool thing, and it looked like a cat, which was probably the biggest selling point, right?
Yeah. Huh. All right, Kai, give us another fad. What is another one?
Well, I think there's always like design trends that happen.
Scan lines
that come and go. Scrolling marquees, like accordion menus,
Blink,
things like that. Any motion on a page.
I think Blink is iconic. We still talk about Blink.
But it's taken out of HTML6, right? Or it's been removed from the HTML language.
It has incorrectly been removed from the HTML language. I agree.
Are we going to have to start one of those petitions online? Bring it back.
Yeah. What is it? Change.org.
Yeah. Rounded corners. I remember there was a lot of rounded corners happening. Those are like trends. I mean, that come and go. So I'm guessing gradients will be back someday. So you have to have an image behind your button.
Do you think that social media is going to, I know, right? Like, I actually do think like we might be sunsetting, like we might be on the other end of the rainbow when it comes to social media. I think, or we might, or this could just be a boomer getting it completely wrong.
I think what it is a boomer getting. It's like my kids do not use social media at all. Like I use like I perceive social media. I won't say I use social media because I don't. I'm sort of old and a little bit resistant to that. Don't like having my life out in the world wide open to see. But my kids communicate with Insta or TikTok or whatever else, right?
Yeah, if you look at a big list of the most popular social media platforms, you'd be surprised.
I'm the same. Like my kids none of my kids are on Facebook. And I've got adult children and I've got a teenager, but like they're. That's why I'm saying like it feels like it's starting to go that way. They're not on Facebook. They're not on Twitter. They're not on.
Well, like they were on MySpace and that kind of went away, and then it's Facebook, and now I think that's losing. That's kind of tied to the boomers, I guess.
It feels like all of those things are just becoming messaging platforms and not necessarily here's me, right? Here's a picture of my kid. Here's a picture of us on vacation.
Not world shouting social, build a social network of 400 of your closest friends, right?
Just like as a society, like we're understanding it more. We've got our literacy of social media, the cautionary tales. I think there's a lot of, like the FOMO, people posting the best parts of their lives and other people getting the wrong idea, like the depression that comes with it, doom scrolling, like I think more I hear of more and more people just unplugging from it, shutting it off, getting away from it.
And that's what I'm getting at. Like as more, I think the generation behind me isn't on it.
Right.
My generation, I mean, we loved it. I loved it in, 15 years ago because it was like, oh, here's everybody, right? And there was no real other, like I wasn't texting old high school buddies, right? It was, here's what he's up to. And now it's morphed into something kind of horrible. And I think the generation behind me isn't on it anymore. My generation is dropping like I see people drop off all the time, and
I thought you were going to say that they're dropping like flies.
They are
like literally dying off of the platform, but no.
No, it's it does feel like it's its best days are behind it, and now we're just going to be, sharing.
We're just waiting for the next fad, right? I mean, let's be honest. Facebook was probably pretty faddish, right? It had ramped up hugely,
Hugely?
and then
Bigly.
drifted down.
All right.
Bigly, Here's what I would like to stop as a fad: YOLO, FOMO, IRL, all of the acronyms that the young people use today. Because I'm old.
You know what I like doing? I do this quite a bit when I'm messaging with some younger developers. I'll use those, but then in parentheses, I'll just say, I'll spell hey, that means you only live once, right?
Nice.
And I'm like, just in case you didn't know, it's a way to identify myself as definitely old and mildly adorable.
Well, the fact that you're using punctuation, I think, is that key indicator, right? And capitalization.
Properly punctuate and capitalize all your text messages.
I know.
What are we? There are rules. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I'm just waiting for one of us old people to come up with a proper casing and punctuating plug-in for all the text messaging stuff. So when my kids are texting me, it will automatically convert the message into something more readable.
Like if you could set your kids to a specific language and say, hey, this is a 15-year-old.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
And it converts it to my age, and it'd be like, oh, that's so nice.
I don't think that's impossible.
I think that's actually kind of fun. Yeah.
I mean, your phones are translating already.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
There should be a millennial translator, a Gen Y.
That's
whatever the next one behind that is.
Exactly.
And I think machine learning could kick in,
which is not a fad.
Move that along.
I don't think that's a fad. I thought it was at one point.
Machine learning, automation, AI, the pursuit of AI. I think that's still happening.
Yeah, I don't think any of that stuff is ever going to reach fad status. It's just going to have a different brand name associated to it.
Yeah.
And we'll call
VR goggles.
Yeah, we'll call like machine learning and AI probably something else. It'll just be a natural part of software development in the future, and we won't have a special practice around it. It'll just be like what we do.
Right.
But VR goggles,
those are going away. Those are going away.
You think so?
It's too hideous anywhere other than in a room by yourself.
Not going to take that any further.
Well, pretend you walked into work and all you saw was people with goggles doing this in their cubes. That would be pretty uncomfortable to walk into, right?
It is a horrible dystopian universe, yes, but
having to strap something onto your head like that to do your work, or like maybe VR goggles in the workplace, like that idea was a fad.
VR, I think, will come in.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of being able to train on a machine, you can't afford to just have extras laying around.
Right.
I mean, Microsoft Flight Sim has proved that already.
We've had simulators for a long time, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think VR miniaturization is going to be bigger than that just going away. Yes. Once it, like to your point, Peter, once it doesn't become dystopian looking,
yes,
I think it'll be a little bit more like, I think Google Glass was probably a little ahead of its time, and probably, I mean, the technology wasn't there, the implementation was horrible, but the idea is probably more accurate than and more reflective of what we'll see in 20 years than.
I think we've seen enough movies that have it geeked out to the level that we want it, that it will probably get there somehow. I just can't see the path, but I think
it's just going to be a heads-up display for like your day-to-day life.
Doing this, hey,
like
Kyle,
you're shopping, you're going through the store, and all of a sudden you're seeing like things fly out. Here's the sales. Here's the sale items. Here's the end caps where the stuff is actually higher than if you went down the aisle. Like, here's the trickery.
Your QCat reader is going to be built into your eyewear.
There you go.
Hey, Kyle, one for you. Do you think that the MCU is a fad?
Heroes have been around forever.
I will say this. It has taken a long time to go from the Superman that I grew up with to the Superman we have today. And there were a lot of steps. And I know that's not MCU. I know that's DC, I think. But, it started with a pretty, Batman cartoons growing up. Again, DC, I understand. But, the Batman, Adam... What's his face? Adam West's Batman versus, the latest incarnation.
Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, those were not. That's not a single step, right? That's a big curve to get there.
In terms of the MCU, like from Iron Man to Endgame was such an event. The fact that
you're
did
going
that,
where I was thinking, yeah. That's why I'm thinking
they're not gonna top that.
Right.
I don't. And
they can. It could happen.
Much material behind all those characters. Like, are you going to redo a version of that, or do you have a pantheon of new characters that you could do that with for another 10 years that would have the same appeal? I don't know. I think they need to change I don't know what they're doing. It doesn't sound like they're doing something as big as that kind of flows together.
Do you think it was a 10-year plan?
Yeah,
to go from Iron Man all the way through that it was in steps?
That's why I think the best days of that might be behind us, because to Kyle's point, you had Iron Man, and then they teased Samuel L. Jackson, and that teased a different franchise, and then that franchise teased a different franchise, and really early on, they got to the Thanos thing, right? And they're like, okay, we all knew for a decade that it's building up to this one big final conflict that we got to see in Endgame. Now, with Phase 4, once that was over, none of those movies are doing that anymore, right? Like, there's no connective tissue. There's no, one person. Thanos was bad, but he was the person that kind of tied all of that together and made it a 10-year story instead of a one movie. Now we have, we've had, 6 movies since that happened and 3 TV series, and they're just all over the place. There's no thread.
Okay.
So I think we're approaching fad status for the MCU. Yeah. I'm hoping for a big King the Conqueror payoff. I've got my fingers crossed. I think it's just taking them a little longer to get it started. But I still have hope.
All right.
I think we should end with hope.
And I don't think superhero movies are a fad. I think they're going to be around for a long time.
I do.
All right. And with that, I think we'll say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
So long.
See ya.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.